Good.
Good.
It's good to be with
It's
you.
good to be with you. We're going to give it a minute and let some people show up. I already know people said they have questions for you um, about a wide variety of yogic subjects. I know a lot of people have had questions about Kundalini. Uh, so we'll see. We'll see when people show up. You know, Tom, I had James Plath up. I Stitch yesterday,
Yeah.
and I told him you were coming up, and of course he said, "I love Tom." And I mentioned a story about you. I don't even know if you know that there's a story about you. Um, you were on a panel, and the discussion was it had gone to, does meditation cause awakening, or does meditation lead to awakening? And it got a little heated, and people going back and forth. And it struck me the one person who meditated sat there very calm and serenely, just smiling and not arguing back and forth. They thought, you know, it's a strange question. Does meditation lead to awakening? It doesn't have to, because the host of benefits that you get from meditating showed right exactly what you were doing. You were sitting there very calm, collected. You weren't taking sides. You weren't yelling. You weren't pointing fingers. You were just happy. And that's enough.
I think Joan knew what I was talking about. If
Right.
it's the same one I'm in, I think Joan and I have the same perspective.
I've heard you say, "Hey guys, we're getting some people in the chat now." I've heard you quote um, Jack Cornfield, I believe, when he says that there's meditation's an accident, or awakening's an accident, but meditation makes you accident prone, which seems to sum it up rather nicely.
Yeah.
So let me let everyone in the chat who just came in know exactly who you are, and then if you don't mind giving a little background information on yourself.
You want me to do that now?
But let me give a brief introduction, guys.
Sure.
This is
Let me
Tom
know.
Thompson.
Just guide me along.
You got it. This is Tom Thompson. I've been Facebook friends with Tom through a mutual friend, Carolyn Wynn, for probably as long as I've been on YouTube. It's been a long time. And I got to tell you something. Almost every important book in the past decade plus that I've come across has been I've found on your Facebook page, or you recommended it. And you've been, I don't know if you realize what a guiding force you've been without even trying to be a guiding force. And I really appreciate that. Tom is a long-time yogi. Um, and I'll let him take it from there and tell us how it all started.
Basically, I was interested in understanding what is life, what's going on, what's the world about. Um, and initially, I started out with a scientific point of view. I was studying science and oh, supposing it had the answers. Because, of course, there was quantum physics going on there, astrophysics, all sorts of things, medicine. I was very interested in medicine, psychiatry, all of that as a kid. But around 16, I found a first book on yoga, and that author said that yoga is the inner science. It's instead of turning out, we turn in. Who am I? What am I? And that got me because it seemed that's what I was looking for. And so from books, I started practicing. And eventually in 1971, I went to Valmorin, Quebec and studied. First time I studied Kundalini, Shivananda's Kundalini yoga book, and also the other yogas is 6-week training, yoga teachers training. And that was my first uh, immersion into yoga. And then later on in the 70s, I spent time with Swami Muktananda in City Yoga and trained to be a City Yoga center leader. And then Sri Dhyan Yogi, who's a master Maha Kundalini Yoga. Eric, the reason I was interested in Kundalini is because Gopi Krishna said it was the evolutionary energy or power in man. And I was hoping that was true because even at an early age, I saw that it would be really a good thing for all of us if humans evolved a little bit. I became a little more compassionate and aware of others. And, so I spent a lot of time practicing and teaching Kundalini Yoga um, in hopes that it would bring about a major shift in consciousness.
Did it?
For me, it did. I don't know about others, but the thing is, even if people are waking up, it's not, they don't have power and they don't have money and they're not on the news. So, for instance, there are communities that nobody, unless people are interested, nobody knows about them, and they're just not what most people are interested in. So there may be, I think there are a lot more people awakening, but the percentage of the population is still extremely small and doesn't really have an impact. They don't have the money. Actually, some of them do, but and they don't have the power. And overall, most people aren't interested in awakening. They don't know what it means. They don't know why they'd want it.
Um,
What's in it for me is the question they ask, and the answer is absolutely nothing.
right. One of the things I talked to James about was awakening, and he brought up quite a bit the neo non-duality and awakening. What's your definition of awakening?
Awakening's awakening awareness out of the identification with the autobiographical self. And the autobiographical self is a construct in time. And, it may start at an early age when our parents are saying things like, you're going to excel in everything you do, or you're lazy and no good, or whatever it is. The programming starts very early with others as a little child telling us who and what we are. If you're born a woman, you get a very different story than if you're born a man, and very different expectations. And so the autobiographical self is being constantly reinforced. And then we become a doctor or a movie star or even a spiritual teacher, and it's our identity. We're feeding that. We're feeding the identity. But that's the autobiographical self. And the reason we have to feed it is because it's not there unless we're thinking about
Right. Do
it,
you
unless we're propping it up.
differentiate between the autobiographical self, sorry, and the ego? Is there a difference there for you, or
Not really. I use autobiographical self because I think it's more descriptive, that it's a story we keep telling ourselves over and over and over and over and over.
I hear a term I've only heard from you before, um, reality tunnels.
Right.
Is it uh, the ego, the autobiological self, creating these reality tunnels?
Yeah, it's for most people the major reality tunnel. And then all these other reality tunnels, like let's say I'm a scientist. Well, there's a reality tunnel. And, I went to Harvard, got my PhD, and now I study whatever. That's a reality tunnel. Or I spent 10 years with Ram Dass. That's a reality tunnel. The trick, Eric, is when somebody has an awakening, and this is a thing I go through every week, is the minute you start talking about awakening, which is not a reality tunnel, it's awakening out of reality tunnels. But the minute you say anything about it, it's a reality tunnel.
So it's
So it requires you're pointing out you're pointing to something, but people grasp the reality tunnel and create a whole culture and religion and all that stuff out of it.
right. So that's the helpfulness of a qualified teacher, because you
Yeah,
might have an awakening experience without a teacher, but then you get sucked back into that reality tunnel of I am a spiritual teacher or I'm an awakened being now.
right. And that's absolutely correct.
Um, I
And
don't
then
want to,
people will buy that. They like that. You know, if you tell somebody you're awake and you have all the answers, there are plenty of people who will flock to you and reinforce that story.
and it's not really posturing, because they honestly believe it and they had an honest awakening experience, but they didn't that little threshold where the reality tunnel catches you and pulls you in, awakening experience and all, and
Right.
suddenly you're a teacher. So I know that you've had profound awakening, uh, but you had the right teachers
Yeah.
to sort of give you that guidance to say, don't buy into your own hype.
Yes. And some of them were ruthless. One story I like to share was with Swami Vishnu. Is he had just had his plane paid in by Peter Max. He had an airplane, and so he invited a small group of his yogis. We all wore yellow, and we were all, we were all in teachers training. He invited us out because a French company wanted to do a video of his airplane and some students doing yoga. So we went out there, and of course our egos were blown up. Oh look, we're out here with a plane, Peter Max, Swami Vishnu, and we're in a movie and all this. And we got back to the ashram, and the septic system, the sewage system, the whole thing was backed up. And since we were standing there, he goes, you, go out there and fix it. And it was like this big pond with a log over, and it was like horror story. But we went from, top of the heap to the bottom of the heap very rapidly because we're out there now cleaning up the sewage system, unplugging it, and everything else, which is not a pleasant thing to do.
I bet. Would you say it's actually okay, no matter where you are, to be in a reality tunnel as long as you know that you're in a reality tunnel, as long as you
We
know,
need reality tunnels to function.
right? So, um, a lot of spiritual teachings, including a great teaching for me, A Course in Miracles, where using the term ego, uh, it is a lot of it is get rid of the ego, get rid of the ego, get rid of the ego. But you know, the same term, reality tunnel. As long as you know that the ego's there, the ego's present. Uh, if you fight it, you're just creating a whole nother reality tunnel of
And that's the ego fighting it.
right.
That's the ego's greatest trick is to pretend like it's trying to get rid of itself.
Uh, and it's very persuasive, isn't it?
But yeah, there are many teachings who say, you have to get rid of the ego. But when you see the totality, the ego is not something we created in the first place. I mean, the ego is part of natural human development, but it's not
Um,
the end of human development.
so, what was if you could? Um, let's tie that in with Kundalini then. Where does Kundalini play in the awakening? Can you have an awakening experience without activating Kundalini?
Kundalini is what makes people spiritual seek. This is my point of view from doing it. So there are people who will disagree. Kundalini is what makes us seekers in the first place. Um, Looking more deeply into life. So Kundalini is that it in its descending phase, it's taking us into identification, with the body, with the mind, with society, religion. It's bringing us, it's contracting into form. But when it awakens, people become seekers. They may not know what they're seeking. They may be taking LSD or whatever, but to put it Nothing has to happen first before awakening happens because awakening's already present. So, from my view, I think Kundalini is in a progressive path that has so many roadside attractions. She will take care of herself if we really find out what we're looking for and question and look deeply. We don't have to really worry about her. She's been running the show from long before we showed up, and so to be able to open and relax and that power, that intelligence may do things, but I think focusing on it is a distraction. I mean, sometimes you have to because it's really powerful and
Right.
stuff. But I think as a path, it's a progressive path with many hoops. To do it safely requires a lot of discipline that most people are not willing, especially in the West, to do, and it's not necessary. But the path, but the Kundalini may manifest. People don't even know what it is when it manifests. They just realize something important, powerful's happened, or they've had a mystical experience.
Um, I have a friend in the chat who wondered about an accidental, especially from impact, Kundalini awakening. If you've had an accident, if you've had, let's say you've taken a fall or something. Do you know of experiences where Kundalini has been triggered purely by accident or by impact? Or
Yeah, that does happen, and it can happen during massage therapy. One of our guys, he actually had a thing on YouTube called the Kundalini something, but Scott was at a cranial sacral session, and Scott was at a session because his back was hurting, and this therapist is very gifted, and Scott had no context for anything we're talking about right now, and he had a profound awakening with all the bells and whistles, visions, just incredible stuff. He describes it on his YouTube videos, but he didn't know what was happening, and he thought he was losing his mind. And so his cranial sacral therapist sent him to me, and he was really the first couple times we met, he was really freaked out. And he calmed down. His whole life has changed. He's now death doula. I
okay.
don't think he ever saw that coming. But his whole life has changed, and he's very committed to waking up. But the Kundalini thing was massively overwhelming for him and frightening because he didn't have a contact. He'd never heard of it before.
Is there a pattern that you could say being the end result of a Kundalini awakening? I mean, obviously, you know, how people process it and what they do afterwards, but is there like a pattern that you would say the after effects of Kundalini awakening?
You mean when it reaches its goal, or just
Yes.
generally?
Well,
Well,
let's start with both. Let's start with generally and then go to when it reaches its goal.
so as Kundalini unfolds, there can be many levels of experiences. Um, they may come and go. You may be psychic. You may have all sorts of different experiences. One of the ones is cosmic consciousness, which leads to the end result. And other problems, there can be problems like physical disabilities because of imbalance. And that's why, diet and exercise and all these other things are so important because people, will often hit an imbalance, the weakest link in the chain, and that can cause problems. That's why it's good to have good guidance. But the end result of Kundalini eh, experience is everything for, I'm just using words, everything is God. There's nothing you have to do, there's nowhere to go. It's all this expressing itself, with whether it's in a form we like or not. And so at the end, there's just this ending release because all there is consciousness expressing as everybody and everything. And it's also brings us to realization the human thinking mind has absolutely no ability to comprehend this. It recognizes itself, but if we try to get it down to a conceptual or philosophical or religious or spiritual understanding, we're missing it. We're trying to put something in a bottle, like putting the whole ocean in a little bottle, and say, look, I've got the ocean. So it's all it. Everything is it. Nothing's it. And so in that scene, there's nothing. People are being guided from within, whether they know it or not, and there's really nothing to do except support people wherever they're at.
So you could have an awakening experience and still not have uh, any beginning of a Kundalini awakening. The two don't actually equate with each other, do they?
Kundalini is always awake, but people may not be aware of it. But it's not a. It's more an expression. But I it put no obstacles in the way of awakening, such as saying, I need Shaktipat to awaken, or I need my Kundalini to get to the third eye to awaken, or I need to be able to go on 10 more retreats. Those are all obstacles of the mind. There's nothing has to be known or done before awakening because what's being awakened to is our natural state, which is already present, completely available. And most spiritual practice is roadside attractions, sort of. Uh, the ego doesn't want awakening to happen for obvious reasons. So most of the stuff we do is distraction from the fact that it's here right now.
It's funny that the ego doesn't want it to happen, and yet when it does happen, we'll still rush in and
Own it.
uh,
Try to own
and
it.
yep, we'll create a whole reality tunnel about that,
That's so important for people to get.
and then they'll offer to show you how to do it for the low price of 1999.
Yeah.
Um, and that can happen to like the most realized spiritual teacher.
Yes. And they can be very eloquent and very intelligent and be able to express things very beautifully and give some, interesting practices to do things, but they're not awakening.
Right.
But yeah, I think there are a lot of people get half baked and then put out a sign and start teaching.
Um, that's interesting because there seems to be a lot of um, with the neo non-duality, um, a lot of teachers out of the blue. Um, but how long did it take for you to actually become a teacher? What you would consider um, maybe not say teacher, but a guide.
So I taught for a long time with permission from my teachers to teach, and I knew all this stuff very well because I've been doing it forever. And I even knew and taught what I'm about to say, but I didn't get it. And what it is that we are creations by a higher intelligence or whatever, and we're being lived. And we are going through processes. And so when Wayne Lickerman was at our center in 2001, I think it was not spectacular. It was not like Kundalini. It was not like the 4th of July. It was actually quite the opposite when I saw that the I that thinks it's Tom is doing absolutely nothing except coming in secondarily and commentate, making comment. And so that's so obvious when it's seen, um, because it's sort of like we all have capacities and we all have things we can't do, and those were, you could say, gifted to us. And so we think we're doing these things, but we're not. It's the genetic, biological, and social programming that's doing those things. And we all have different skills and abilities. We have different personality adaptations, and when those are known, people are highly predictable. And passive aggressive people hate that, and they try to figure out clever tricks to show that they're not highly predictable. But in their doing that, is they're being highly predictable.
Highly predictable in their claim of being unpredictable.
Yeah, they're trying to fool me and stuff.
One of the things, and I know you said that you're not an authority on this, but uh, you thought that you could offer a perspective. Was one of the reasons why I asked you to come up to begin with. Although you were on my list when I decided to broaden my YouTube channel, people that I really wanted to talk to, because you've been such a big help for me through the years.
Thank you,
But
Eric.
thank you. I wanted to ask you about the pain body.
Oh yes. So, and this is very pragmatic. So I've worked in mental health most of my life, and I worked on an inpatient psych unit for 13 years. I'm just giving that background, and I'm trained in transactional analysis. As a matter of fact, I'm sort of still training at the main place is right up the road here, the Southeast Institute. And I started training there around 1991. So the pain body is an energetic accumulation of anger, judgment, control, all of these things that we usually keep somewhat repressed, but it needs to feed. It knows how to set up situations so it will feed, and it knows how to trigger other people's pain bodies. And so, pain body is when you really get upset. One of the things pain bodies need to do is be right and make others wrong. But the victim pain body can do the exact opposite is I'm wrong and they're all right. So it's a tricky thing, but it's really like being possessed by a negative energy field of thoughts and feelings because we're not presently aware. And it causes problems. It causes problems in all our relationships, the pain bodies do. And it causes problems everywhere. A pain body and the game plane is so deeply embedded in human society, it's not seen. It's just part of life. But when we become aware when our pain body's taking over, just that awareness, just being present with it and watching it, it's not being fed. So it's losing its power. It's not being fed by my thinking I'm right and those stupid people over there are wrong. We're just watching that tendency. And each time it comes up and we don't feed it, it gets weaker and weaker and weaker. And after a while, you have no buttons to be pushed. And it often drives other people nuts when that happens because most people don't know how to relate to others without the pain body being involved, without game playing being involved. So when a person's not playing games anymore, they're not being triggered, their pain body's not being triggered. Uh, Other people don't know how to relate to them because they don't know what's what's wrong with them. And what they usually do then is escalate, trying to push their pain body gets very frustrated and really tries to get yours to come out and play. And at a certain point, they'll go bother somebody else, thankfully.
Are there individual pain bodies, and then could we say like family pain bodies and collective pain bodies, even national pain
Absolutely.
bodies?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. I think one of the pain bodies I've dealt with all my life is female pain body because women are bought into a set of expectations that are there before they show up. Almost all cultures and all religions, if you're born a female baby, you're born into a reality tunnel. And you're programmed. For instance, it's not okay for women to get angry, but it's okay for them to get sad or anxious. So a lot of women, when they feel anger coming up, it's repressed, and instead they get passive, sad, and angry. And so the society at all levels reinforces this. And then a woman who starts breaking free of her pain body is often called a bitch.
Hmm.
She's just a bitch because she's not playing the game. She's not doing what she's programmed to do. If you're born in a certain religion, that pain body, certain country, America, right or wrong, that pain
Right,
body. So you're absolutely right. Not only are there personal pain bodies, but being a man, that's a real pain body. Real men don't cry. Uh, all this programming, um, the inability to get in touch with feelings. This is all part of the pain body. So you can ask some men, "What are you feeling?" They'll go, "I don't know," and that's because they've never had a context of really checking in. And what they do is have a couple beers instead.
right.
So
So,
yes, you're absolutely right. The pain body exists historically, individually, culturally, within the sexes.
so we almost could say that we owe it to our families, our communities, our country, and the world by learning and working with our own pain bodies, because it's never going to happen collectively until it happens individually.
Right. And I think that's one of the perhaps the most important thing we can do. Stop being reactive and stop trying to. So it's a survival mechanism, being right, trying to be right, and to be able to not have that drive there, and to be able to relate to people very openly and honestly. Dogen said enlightenment is intimacy with all life. Well, when you're game playing, you're not being intimate. You're playing a game, and you know your role in the game, even if it's loser, and you know what their role is. And we don't know who we are outside the game, but that's where real presence and intimacy comes in. It isn't a knowing; it's a being with people, actually being with them.
That little thing alone, knowing that almost everyone is representing their pain body, is almost like instant compassion, that you're not dealing with that person, you're dealing with their pain body.
Right,
Uh, and at the same time, I could see how the ego might rush in and say, well, that's just your pain body talking, creating that reality tunnel of, you know, I don't have a pain body. And what you're saying isn't valid because it's just your pain body.
right,
So we really need that awareness, uh,
yeah,
not so much in other people, but our own pain body.
yeah. So you're right. The ego or pain body is very clever about creating being back into that elitism, as I know about the pain body and I'm right because I know about it, and you're
Right.
just your pain body's running you, that doesn't really happen if somebody's free of the pain body. That there's a real openness. Uh, there's discernment, but there's no judgment.
Is there a distinction you would make between pain body and ego?
I think it's possible to be an egoic identity without the pain body being there, but it certainly makes it more possible for the pain body to come up.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. Um, Tom, are you willing to answer some questions?
Sure. If I can, I'll be happy to.
All right, guys, we're going to open things up for some questions. Uh, we can talk pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, you are just a great, great authority on meditation by far. Yoga, I know you know quite a bit of yoga philosophy, but I'm always drawn more towards yoga psychology. I'm always, philosophy is wonderful, uh, but you can debate, is it true? Is it not true? Uh, but yoga psychology, you either feel better or you don't feel better. You either relate to people better or you don't relate to people better. You either relate to yourself better or you don't. Uh, and so we have a host, Kundalini, a host of things that our friend Tom could address. So just uh, if you could put question maybe in capital so I can see that it's a question, I'm going to do my best to get everyone. Um, John says he has a question. He wants to know, well, he says, tell us about your first out of body experience. For one, have you ever had an out of body experience?
I've had experience, again, I use the word I just to make communication simple. I've had experiences where there was no body.
Which,
I don't know if that's, it's not, doesn't sound like what a lot of people report. I've had friends who were have their blood being drawn and suddenly they're up in that corner of the room looking down at their body and the doctor. I don't think I've ever had an experience like that.
um, have you have you had experiences of being aware while you're asleep?
Yes.
And I know I think I've read somewhere you've heard of people who've had or even known who have been aware when they've been put under before surgery, anesthesia.
They're not aware, but awareness is there. Hold on, something just self-unfolding. Would you like to confirm your Apple account and Apple success? Okay, I hope I took care of that correctly.
I think so. It looks good. You're a braver man than I am because I'm always afraid. Whenever I press a button, I'm live streaming and I press a button and everything goes haywire.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's why I was hesitating. I didn't, it said yes or no, and it's like, got me.
Our friend Adam says, "What are the fruits of the pain body?" In other words, obviously, anger, anything else. So by fruits, he doesn't necessarily mean good.
Yeah, the pain body is basically, in the simplest form, negative energy field, and it's triggered by a identification with suffering, whether we're creating it in others or ourselves. One of the fastest ways to see somebody's pain body is when they're drinking alcohol. For a lot of men, their pain body comes out. And it happens a lot where when they're drunk, they're abusive to their partner or their children or whatever. When they sober up, they're horrified about what they did and they swear they'll never do it again. And they mean it. And they're horrified. But then they drink again, and the pain body's back. And the pain body does In other words, the pain, it's like being possessed. There's another entity there. And you can
Um,
see that. Everybody's going to Thanksgiving in a while. It's like everybody in the same family goes to a different Thanksgiving and they all report it very differently. What does happen is if you're becoming free of your pain body, usually somebody will keep poking at you, trying to trigger it because, again, they don't know how to relate. If the pain body isn't getting upset, angry, defensive, attacking, whatever the pain body does.
there's probably, well, there is a reason why alcohol is called spirits. It's, would literally become possessed by that pain body.
Yes. I think alcohol is extremely dangerous drug. If it's not the most dangerous drug, it's right up there.
Um, Pat and Jack says, question, is it possible to just ask for the rising Kundalini energy and it begin just for the asking?
Yes. Again, I think it's important to assume it's already active, it's intelligent, it's what makes us intelligent. It already knows what you're thinking and feeling. But if you want to consciously ask it, it's called sankalpa. You can ask it 3 times, please help me become awake, whatever it is, 3 times, and then let it go. Because it's not going to do it necessarily in the way we think it should. It knows what it's doing. It's running the entire freaking universe. It can probably, but to be able to feel you have communication with it, you are it, but still to ask it is great.
Should we ask for it gently, a gentle experience, so that we don't trigger?
Yeah. And it doesn't always know what gentle is, and it doesn't always know what appropriate is. So you can almost make a deal with it saying, I'm going to give you an hour every day, do whatever you want. But when I'm at work, I went to Shaktipat once and I came back to work. I was in a factory. And I went to a water fountain and I turned the water on, and this huge flame came shooting out. At least that's what I saw. And I backed up real quickly and everything. And I was having s- some power. This is a factory. I was having some powerful experiences. So at a certain point, I asked if I'm going to have those things, only have them when I'm meditating, not at work at AMF. So it works. It usually works,
Um,
especially if you're giving her time to do whatever she wants to do.
our friend Squirrel Sniper says, how do you see this ancient esoteric teachings adapting to a world increasingly dominated by science, technology, and materialism?
Well, it's not being dominated by materialism. That was sort of thrown out over 100 years ago with Einstein. Um, the vision of Kundalini, of infinite being, is very similar to what the greatest scientists see in quantum physics. So there's not a conflict, from my view, between the true spiritual process and real science, because both are based in not knowing. And most materialistic science, I suppose there's some people still clinging to something that's been proven false for, like I said, over a century. But basically, all there is energy, and both yoga and science say that.
Um, Heart Matter says, what types of negative behavior do you attribute to social expectations? Before you answer that, could we say social expectations are an aspect of the pain body?
They can be. Um, Again, the social expectations of what it means to be a successful person can be very debilitating to people who don't have those natural abilities. Social expectations of what it means to be a woman or a man, successful. All of these things can really trigger pain bodies if if one's not living up to what they're told. So in most families, many families, the children are really narcissistic extensions of the parents. So granddad went to Yale, I went to Yale, you're going to Yale, whether you want to or not. And grandpa found the company, I'm running the company, and when you get out of Yale, you're going to run the company. And you're going to represent the family name. Of course, in Europe, this happens with royalty and all that. And so you're born into a set of expectations. And if you have, yeah, and a lot of people have no problems doing all that. But if you start looking at things and questioning things, it can cause a lot of problems.
Could say that was the entirety of the 1960s.
Yeah,
Not wanting to live up to the social expectations that were placed upon an entire generation.
right.
Our friend Lee Liu says, "Evening, Tom." He's in Great Britain, so it's evening for him.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
you mentioned passive aggressive earlier. May you give me a definition of this, please?
Passive aggressive is so many different forms, but it's a form where it looks like a person's doing one thing, but they're sabotaging behind the scenes. So they can claim that they're innocently doing what you asked them to do or what they said they would do, yet they've made sure at another level it won't work out.
Sniper has another question. How do you see the? Oops, I'm sorry. I answered. You answered that already. That was esoteric. Kat said, "Woo hill." Think you made Kat very happy with your answer. She right now she is probably talking to her Kundalini, saying, "Come on, come on, you
Yeah,
can do it."
you can really, if you want, have that type of, I call her she, and I often, she's the goddess of the entire universe, but she's also right here.
Um, Heart Matter says, "Can pain body also be used for other things than pain, comfort, body shame, etc.?"
Well, body shame is the pain body. It, re- in terms of individual and other relationships, I don't know if the pain body has any positive aspect. It's when the pain body's active, we're in a trance. We're literally in a trance, and we believe the trance.
So sometimes something that we might take for as comfort uh, can really just be going deeper into the trance that I'm comfortable because I know it and because it doesn't
Yeah,
make me step outside.
and I know I'm right. Damn it! And those people over there are wrong.
Right. There's a there's a
And
lot of
I have a
comfort.
whole bunch of friends who say I'm right.
Yeah. I see it. I see it on your Facebook page.
Yeah, there you go.
um, let's see. Hi, Flora.
You know where it's interesting is in science. I had the good fortune of knowing, even growing up, some real true scientists. And they don't mind being criticized or questioned or anything else because they're curious like little children. But there are other scientists who, if you question something, their pain body's triggered and they get very angry and very defensive and argue for their point of view, but it's their pain body doing that, not the authentic scientist. And so that's very interesting to see that happen. But every true scientist I've known is totally open. They're like curious little kids with very high IQs.
One of the big things with maybe people don't realize with scientists is they're perfectly happy, most of them, uh, having a theory being disproved. because
Right,
it leads to the next theory, the next theory, and the next theory.
right. That's absolutely correct. So that right wrong thing, they want to see evidence, but the right wrong pain body thing doesn't show up for true scientists in that way.
Um, how much is the pain body, or is it at all, do you think, addressed in traditional yogic practice or a traditional Buddhist practice?
I think that would depend on the teacher. I don't think. I think. I think you see the pain body showing up in Buddhist communities and yoga communities and other places as much as anywhere else. And that's why I think Tolley was a genius for coming up with it and describing it. It shows up everywhere. And often a false teacher will use other people's pain bodies to maintain control and domination.
Hmm.
They'll have their enlightened henchmen. I had one guy he was really, I can't go into this too much, but he was very close to this very famous American guru, and he came to our center in Connecticut to present a seminar. And he told me a lot of stuff privately, but he told me that when this guy, their teacher, was manic, he would tell all his close disciples that they finally reached the right stage and they're all enlightened. And so they'd all celebrate. You five are enlightened, you've reached the seventh stage, blah, blah, blah. But then he would crash from his mania and he'd take it back. He'd take it away. I was just joking. You're not enlightened. You're just an idiot like everybody else. So their degree of enlightenment was like an ocean wave, depending on whether this guy was high or low. And this particular person who was close to him just learned to stand back and let whatever happen happen because it was the teacher's whims, and the teacher had a pretty powerful pain body himself.
Um, yeah, it was Eckhart Tolle where I first read the term pain body.
Yeah,
Uh, Nothing through any yoga or Buddhist. And I've always appreciated the fact of your deep appreciation for Eckhart Tolle, especially his book, The New Earth. I've heard that you recommend that from your center quite a
yeah,
bit.
both the New Earth and Power of Now. And what's interesting, Eric, with the Power of Now, it triggers people's pain bodies. And I've had people yell at me about it. I've had them throw it out. I've had to throw it across the room. And I tell them, wait a little while, go slow, start again. But it definitely triggers a lot of people's pain bodies because that's not what they want to be hearing.
Right. I think probably a lot of teachers too,
Yeah,
because I know some teachers who are so anti Tolle, um,
yeah,
and it's amazing because they almost say the same thing that Eckhart Tolle says, um, but for whatever reason, uh, they make a target out of him.
yes, I've seen that too. But I've reconsidered this many times ever since that first book came out. I've really looked at it, and I still think Tolle's a genius in his presentation of the pain body because it affects all of us.
Right.
And if we have the honesty to really take a look at our pain body without judgment and to be present and notice when it arises, that's what's going to change the human race. Because almost all the horror in the world is triggered pain bodies.
So when Tolle says evolve or die, he's
That's right.
literally saying deal with the pain body.
Yes.
Um, Kat says, "How do I help someone whose pain body has been activated in a conversation with a group of people?"
Does that mean they're in the group actively or
Uh, Kat, you can. I'm gonna say yes, and Kat can correct me if it's different.
our responsibility is to watch our pain body and not trigger theirs. If somebody's pain body is triggered, one of the ways of dealing with that is ask them, you're not trying to set them up, you're not playing a game, but just ask them clarifying questions. Now, just that in itself can trigger somebody's pain body because if they don't have answers, then they're going to lose it. But you to have a very simple conversation, just asking them what's going on, why do you think that? Why do you feel that way? But it's not you're not asking it in a way of putting them down. It's really asking them. And this is what we do with people leaving cults: is you're trying to when you ask somebody leaving a cult questions, you're trying to get their own discernment in action again. And once their discernment is working again, they're going to see they're going to be horrified that they're in a cult at a certain point. It's like, how did I ever do that? And it's the same thing with the pain body is you have to be skillful and ask questions to get them to sort of see. But so many people are profoundly committed to their pain body. I'm right. You can look at the news and see I'm right. And that right wrong thing is just one example of the pain body is, making yourself wrong is also that's the victim, you know, poor pitiful me.
A wonderful line from A Course in Miracles that says, "You can choose to be right or kind."
Yeah, that's good. I'll go with that.
Uh, I know that you are not. I, I think you might have. I've heard you say you might have skimmed through the course, but never. You're not. I know you're not a. Um,
Yeah, Dr. Roger Waddell, who's a family physician, was really in the Course of Miracles, and he taught it at our center. And his introductory talk, I wish I recorded it. It was one of the best talks ever, and it was about the Course in Miracles. So it was the type of talk that once you hear it, you immediately want to come to his class because he just presented it so clearly and so well. But I get stuck on you need do nothing.
I talk about that quite a bit, um, because that has gotten me in a lot of trouble in my relationships when I fold my arms and they say, "Oh no, I need to do nothing. I'm not going to take the garbage out. I need to do nothing. I'm not going to wash the dishes. I need to do nothing." Gets me in a lot of trouble. It's never gotten me out of doing anything, but I keep trying though. Um, I'm going to ask you a question, but first, Adam has a question. Percolated fish. Is there a relationship between repressed anger, hurt, and grief to the pain body?
Anger is usually the pain body. It can be appropriate to a situation, but if it's a psychological or emotional anger, it's usually the pain body. Um, what was the second part of the question? Because I had a different answer.
Um,
Something about
so,
grief or sadness.
yep. Is there a relationship between repressed anger, hurt, and grief to the pain body? Um, so a relationship between the anger and the hurt and the grief.
Well, grief is natural. The pain body can hijack it, but grief is a very natural thing.
That's a huge thing to say for you. I mean, it's so important to know it's okay to grieve.
Oh, yeah. And trying to repress that is definitely not good. And grieving is massively overwhelming.
Um, Speaking of grief, I I reached out to you when my as I was caregiver for my father,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
after his
yeah.
death, and you couldn't have been kinder to me, and just a great presence. And I wanted, since I'm talking to you face to face, the opportunity to say thank you. Um, my question: so, how do we actually do it? How do we actually heal and begin to heal the pain body?
Stay present. And the way to stay present is using your senses. Like, what am I really seeing? What am I really hearing? Even, washing the dishes, what have you. Stay present with the person. When we're in a conversation, we're often triggered to go back into our heads in our internal dialogue. But the light of aware presence will see the pain body as an object in a way and recognize it, and it's not what we really are. It's just this s- deep structure that arises when it's triggered. And when we see it and we don't feed it by trying to judge it or control it or anything, we just see it, it gets depleted. And after a while, something that may have triggered you really badly at one point, it doesn't get triggered at all anymore. So when we identify with something like I'm really angry, we're feeding it with life force, with energy. If we just see it and go, that's the pain body, and don't get involved, there's nothing to keep it there. It just starts dissipating.
I usually talk quite a bit that uh, the entirety of yoga is a path of awareness, and that everything begins to change when we're aware, especially of all the things that we have no idea, like the kleshas. We have no ideas of the afflictions of the mind, and yet it's running the entire show until we become aware. Uh, you'd mentioned Sankalpa. Once aware, can you enter a Sankalpa to heal my pain body? Can I heal the my addiction to the afflictions of the mind? Or do you think you need more active?
Again, the afflictions have to be fed. What I recommend in terms of the samskaras and the vasanas and all of these things is wake up first and then see what needs to be done. Because a lot of things don't exist unless we're thinking about them and they can disappear. Now, it's true, a lot of these things affect the subtle body and everything, but even there, uh, whole knots of energy just disappear. It's because consciously or unconsciously we were holding them in place. So then, when there's been some awakening, and then we go back and look at these things, we have a totally different perspective. And it's not the ego trying to fix itself. So it's much easier and much faster.
Is there a role for psychotherapy in this?
The trick with psychotherapy is getting a good psychotherapist
Um, and a
and psychiatrist, all those things. Yeah.
and what would you? It would be so helpful if a therapist had at least an awareness of being aware. Um, that if if they knew of the pain body, and of course some of it might be cloaked in psychological language.
Yeah. So I think transactional analysis, Eric Berne describes somebody who's psychologically healthy has the ability to be aware, game free, script free, and totally intimate. And so when you look at Eric Berne, he's the person who created transactional analysis description of somebody who's healthy. He's pretty much describing somebody who's awake. So what we live out of in terms of that is we live out of our scripts. Like, I'm really dumb and I have to try harder. I'm really smart and everybody should honor me. Whatever our scripts are, which are unconscious, but we live them. and the games we learn how to play. Um, those are all programs. But when you're really present and intimate, you're outside those games and scripts and you're dealing with what's actually happening. But we have no sense of self when those scripts and games are gone.
Um, so a lot of the new, not a lot of the newer therapists, and by newer, I guess I could say the last 20, 30 years, um, are changing the passive uh, therapist uh, as an observer and more of a interaction of joining someone uh, where they are emotionally and helping to uh, draw that out. Is that similar to what you were talking about?
Yeah, I think a good therapist is you're in a relationship, and that relationship, again, there's all sorts of things can happen, but basically, it's an adult to adult relationship, and other ego states like the child or parent may flow in, but basically, it's a relationship of equals, and the therapist is, of course, there to help the person, but not as one up.
Right.
I'm one up, you're one down.
Our friend Richard had a question. I had to go back and find it. He said, "How is it that our mind can feel depressed and happy at the same time, but our body doesn't allow us to function like we want it to?"
How does our mind let us be depressed and happy at the same time, but our body,
Doesn't allow us to function like we want it to. So we're having
well,
the physical
the
effects.
body is pretty much a genetic program, and the mind is too. The thinking mind. Again, if you have enough information about personality adaptations, people are extremely highly predictable.
Um, let's see. Adam says, "Is retention part of the practice in Kundalini yoga?" Uh,
Is what?
retention. So I think he's talking about semen retention, if I'm
Yeah,
not mistaken, Adam.
right. So the semen, the sexual fluids, male and female, are like the rocket fuel for Kundalini. So traditionally, that energy goes down and out and creates other humans. But at a certain point, what can happen is it's transmuted and starts going up and is into the cerebral spinal fluid and is used as literally food. It's transmuted for the energy fields and the Kundalini. Uh, that can spontaneously happen. I used to do the job of after Shaktipad, telling people, giving them information. One of the things is it's best you're going to be celibate, and that freaked a lot of people out. It's just, I don't, and so that's fine. It doesn't matter, but uh, people get stuck at the second chakra. You can have overwhelming sexual desire when the Kundalini is active. And what's really funny is when you, let's say, you're trying to be celibate, you actually become more sexually attractive to the opposite sex or whoever because you're emanating this. So here you are, you've taken a vow, I'm going to be celibate, I'm not going to have any sexual relationships. And then suddenly these people are all attracted to you. And it's like, it's almost like a test. It's very funny. One guy who is a guru who I really like, and I think he's very honest, but he got in a little trouble once. And he was very honest talking to me. He said, "What would you have done if you were like 19 years old and women from all over the world were coming and sitting at your feet and they thought you were God and wanted to get you into bed?" And I'm like, "Okay, you got me." I mean, that's what most 19-year-old men want. So he, he told the truth, though. I mean,
Sadly, a lot of people never progress past that 19-year-old state.
right.
They still uh, it's still life is still a matter of conquest, sexual or otherwise.
Yeah. And in psychotherapy, they talk about transfer and counter transfer. That's really important. It should be in spiritual teacher training too, because that's definitely going to happen. Is you're going to see, oh, there's Kundalini in the form of this beautiful woman over there, or they're going to think you're some enlightened something or other. And to be very aware of the dynamics of that transfer, that transmission of sexuality, and not get hooked by it. And of
Interest.
course, we both know, another one bites the dust. People fall in all traditions by not being able to see the dynamics and deal with them.
Sometimes I wonder um, if some don't see it very clearly and say, "Yeah, but I want it anyway."
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
And I don't know uh, what's worse for a self-proclaimed, self-realized master to not see it, or a self-proclaimed, self-realized master to see it and then say, "Yeah, but I'm willing to do it anyway."
if they're totally honest about it, and the other person is a willing participant, there's not a problem. It's when they're using it, you get a better Shakti pot if we have sex, things like that. Or one guru told this woman that in a past life, he was Jesus and she was Mary. And that was working really well, except he told two other women in the community the same thing. And as happens, the women started talking to each other. No, I'm married. No, I'm married. And they realized this guy's running all three of them.
The lesson is you got to be very careful and original with your pickup lines.
Yeah,
Uh, they're going to come back and haunt you.
and keep them separate. Keep them
Yeah,
at different
exactly.
places.
I learned that in every bar I went to during the 1990s. Uh,
I
all
had
right,
a
guys.
client. I had a client once. I got to the point with him that I was going to actually take him to a bar and show him how to relate to women because they had the worst pickup lines. And one of the things he usually told a woman within 5 minutes is, women are the most selfish species there is. And I go, Bill, that's not a good pickup line. That's
Yep.
not, you may think that, you may believe it, but he really just, it was really amazing. He would insult them. And some women will respond to that,
Some
but
people
not the
think
majority.
if you say it with enough confidence, it's going to work. Uh,
Yeah.
it's not proven to be the case for me, but um,
I've spent very little time in bars.
um, you know, you mentioned Wayne Lurkerman, and
Yes.
I remember the story with him where his guru said that your drinking, your drugs, that was your path.
Yeah.
Um, it was my drinking for me was part of my path as well. Unbeknownst to me, I started practicing sincerely meditation while I was drinking, and I didn't realize the effect that it was going to have on me until the moment came when I was confronted with sobriety, where I knew if I wanted to, I could step into that in this moment and never take a drink again. And I stepped into it. And when I did, I could look back and see how everything aligned perfectly. The meditation, if I hadn't been meditating, um, like I'm often asked, was it hard for you to quit drinking? And my answer was no, because I never tried. In a decade of hard drinking, I never once tried to quit. I didn't struggle because I wanted to do what I was doing for totally bad reasons. I was attempting to erase myself through alcohol. Um, and yet, at the same time, I was planting those seeds that was eventually going to save me, meditating, practicing yoga, doing breath work. Um, and I could see after I stepped in that sobriety, uh, and again, it was no struggle because it was just given it as a gift. And Bill W. said that every true uh, moment of sobriety comes as an epiphany, that you see things differently for whatever reason. And it was really meditation that gave me that, and yoga that gave me that gift, as well as early practicing A Course in Miracles. Um,
Well, that's fantastic that happened.
I'm blessed because I people who were with me during those times, some are no longer with me. Some have drank themselves in an early grave, or drunk themselves in an early grave, or unfortunately harmed others uh, before they had that opportunity. And some are still struggling. Some are sober, but they're struggling.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. It's hard.
it is because mainly you don't you might not be drinking, but you're still addicted.
Yeah.
And I honestly think the gift of uh, yoga. I'm not afraid to say. I might not say this with everyone. I'm not afraid to say it with you. It's spiritual practice. The gift of spiritual practice for me was the ability to quit drinking and giving up the addiction at the same time.
So, Eric, would you say you actually felt better doing spiritual practice than drinking?
Yes,
Yeah, because drinking ultimately, it seems like there's a few minutes where you almost like enlightened. The mind's not working. There's pure perception, but but then you drink more,
right.
trying to keep that, and it just doesn't work. And it's
It's a great
uh,
analogy because the same thing was happening in meditation. There was those moments where everything dropped aside. I achieved what I wanted from uh, drinking, which was to drink myself away. I
right.
meditated a certain aspect of myself away, and it, just like you said, you got to drink more. I had to meditate more, um, and more joyfully, and longer, and more deeper, and it just kept spilling out through every aspect of my life.
Alcohol represses awareness, where meditation expands it. So the joy is from two different dimensions. But alcohol and most drugs are repressive. They're
Um,
making us less conscious.
I'm glad you mentioned that. So, in just a moment, we're going to wrap things up. But you mentioned drugs. Don't talk about often here, but plant medicine. What role does and has it played for you in any awakening? Um,
Well, in the 60s and 70s, the usual psychedelic things without any casualties on my part. However, I do recommend not riding the New York subway on LSD. Um, So I had, and that's ultimately, part of the process. Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert at Harvard, early on, I think a Life or Look magazine did an article on them and their Tibetan Book of the Dead translation, the psychedelic experience, it was called. So they were talking about, you take this pill and you basically are enlightened or have enlightenment experience. Well, I was like middle teens sounded really good to me. And I was living in New York, so had access actually to New York Psychiatric Institute to Sandoz LSD and stuff like that. The last time I did anything was when I turned 65. I got some really good psilocybin. My brother was dying of cancer, so he had this contact who had every drug you can imagine, but he also had really good psilocybin cubanus, I think it was. So from around Thanksgiving through February, I took it fairly regularly. I haven't really done anything. Actually, an architect dropped off a little package here one day. But what happened is when I worked in psychiatry, I saw way too many psychedelic casualties. And I realized they're unpredictable. You may think, I'll take LSD, I'll be fine. And so I do think guide and set and setting are very important. But I've seen many Kundalini casualties. People who are teetering on the lines of mental health can push them over. People who think they're just fine, it can push them over. I've seen people who are very accomplished and doing well in life uh, lose it from a very bad, powerful psychedelic experience. I think the value of psychedelics is we are so encapsulated in our worldview that we actually think it's true. And taking a powerful psychedelic blows that apart. You realize there's a lot more going on than our programming. And I think that has value. But the trick is to have, and they also can get the Kundalini going. But I think that can be very useful because it does open up people's minds. It wouldn't be open otherwise. But it's you have to be very careful and really have a good guide. And there are people training to be guides out there. There are a lot of people who are seriously training to be psychedelic guides, know how to use it and stuff like that.
I think it was Huxley who said that it opens up a door, but
Yeah, yeah,
it's the same door every time, and you need to take increasing amounts and different types in order to keep going through that same door. And meditation blows the door wide open.
yeah, yeah. And that's the thing is again looking at the '60s, all the people who took psychedelics and now their lives are unchanged. They're doing what they were programmed to do.
It's I was thinking about asking you about that. I've never asked anyone this before, um, although I've talked about it to a few people. Uh, what happened to the hippies? Because they could have changed the world. They were on the precipice of changing the world, and then they became uh, I don't know, my accountant, my
Right. They
you know,
sold out.
yeah. I was looking for a better way of saying it,
So
but
when I was in college, I had this friend and I was not in a fraternity, but he was in a fraternity and the good news was I was invited to I was a social affiliate of certain fraternities. So I got to go to their parties, didn't have to deal with the rest of their crap. So this guy was really cool guy, had long hair. He was really cool. And then one day he comes in, his hair's been cut, he's wearing a suit, and he comes down, he starts trying to sell, Tom, you're going to be graduating soon and going out in the world. You really need to be backed by some good insurance policies. So let me, and I'm like, what the hell happened to you, man? I couldn't believe he's trying to sell me insurance. And too many. And I had a friend had millions of adventures with, but he came from very wealthy area with wealthy people, and uh, he cut his hair and went back and joined the party, the yachts, the whole 9 yards. He was free of it for many, many years, and then went back.
that story is the perfect metaphor for uh, that generation. There's a few outliers. I'm in talks if we can work it out technically. Ken Babs to come up and have a conversation. Ken Babs was a contemporary of. You remember the electric Kool-Aid acid test?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
Ken Babs and Ken Casey,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
as well as George Walker. George Walker was the last person to hang out with Neil Cassidy under the bridge
Wow,
by the river in Mexico. Um, and they might come up and have a conversation,
that would be
which
great.
they stayed uh, they stayed who they were the entirety. Same with
Yeah, I
Ken
think
Kesey.
Allen Ginsberg did.
Allen Ginsberg did. Uh, Sadly, Jack Kerouac, although he wasn't really that generation, but he did not seem to stay Jack Kerouac.
He got pretty mentally ill from alcoholism towards the end. It was sad.
It was sad because he had some true moments, and you can see it in his writings of
Yeah.
transcendence.
And he
Uh,
wrote those books, Gary Snyder, who's one of my superheroes, he wrote that book, The Dharma Bums, which is basically about
on my shelf.
Gary. Yeah.
Uh,
So Gary's never sold out. He's in his 90s something.
he's the last of the, I believe, one of the last of the Beat generations, one of the last of the
Yeah.
Beats. Ferlinghetti passed away 1 or 2 years ago.
Yes. I've been to that bookstore. Never met Ferlinghetti. Met Gary, though,
Oh,
which was really great.
I can imagine. I might also, if I get the chance, um, Don Latin, who wrote a great book, The Harvard Psychedelic Club. Um,
I may have read that.
Wonderful book.
Does he talk about, geez, I can't think of his name, but he was one of the guys that sort of sabotaged the whole psychedelic thing at Harvard. He's now got
Dr.
it.
Wheel, Andrew
What's it?
Wheel,
Yeah.
Andrew Wheel,
Yeah.
yeah,
See?
who's a great alternative doctor. I practice. He brought a great pranayama technique to the forefront. It's an ancient, but he marketed it very nicely. The 4-7-8 breath, um,
Right.
and the entirety of A Course in Miracles is about forgiveness. And when I read Andrew Wheel, got that little bit of resentment. um, but at the same time, hey, it got Ram Dass to India.
Right. That's the way to see it. Yeah. But I think I did read that book. But yeah, Ram Dass, it's great he went to India for all
Um,
of us. He was a great being. We went to, we taught at the same conference once, and it was great. I saw him other times too, but that conference, it was really great to be there.
our friend Turia Hill has another great example. Zen teacher Peter Coyote is another example of a former hippie has kept the vision of the 60s alive.
Yeah.
Um,
He does a lot of audio books, I think, on Zen.
he does
Reads
on
them.
Zen, and he did almost, I believe, almost all of Carlos Castaneda's books on tape as well. He was another huge influence for me way back, planting seeds way back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Um, when I look back, my entire life was seeds planted without me even realizing. Coming across a book when I was 11, Teach Yourself Yoga. And
Who
my
is that
parents,
by?
and it was they published in England. And I don't think it actually had like a particular author. It was like a teach yourself um, sort of
One
a
of those
compilation.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and as well as I might have been 12, Yoga Youth Reincarnation by,
Yes, Just Stern.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
that
was
was
like,
one of my early books.
and it's just amazing that 11 or 12, the magic of that stuck with me. And I would always return. I literally bought a book, Teach Yourself Yoga at 11, and taught myself yoga postures and did the candle meditation that
Product.
it is.
That's very,
Yeah.
very, very, very powerful.
I It is until your parents come in and yell, "Put that out!" and where did he get the matches? Um, I
My
but
parents would come in and go, "What's that smell?" I go, "It's incense."
smart. Um, my parents would always ask, "Why are there little circular holes in our screen?" Um, I was like, "I don't know. I don't know." Um, it just happens. So those little seeds have continued through my life. And Tom, I've been honored that you have been part of that. And
I
I,
appreciate that, Eric. I'm glad to.
so we're going to wrap. you mind coming back sometime,
I'd be
talking again?
happy to. This was great. I mean, you and I have known each other, and this is great to be able to talk and be together and share. And it's anytime. Just let me know.
I will. We just did, right now, we hit an hour and a half and it flew by.
Yeah, yeah.
So, Tom, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you. It's been a
Uh,
pleasure.
it has. Guys, we're going to close up. I will see everyone. I'm live again, 5:25.
And thank you
Love
all
you
for
all.
your questions and comments. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks again, Tom.
Take care. There we go.